Just as Spirit is about bridging the gap between spirituality and mental health. I think emotions and spirit have so much in common. Once you start to process your emotions, what I say in Just as Spirit, it all becomes one. It will be hard to separate the two. If you desire to separate the two, you will have to regress back into old behaviors to do that.
That's so interesting, because the way that I talk about it and have for a very long time is that the way your soul speaks to you is through the language of feeling.
That's it. That's it, sister.
You're listening to Practical Spirituality with B, the podcast with spiritual advice for your everyday life, helping you align with your soul so you can live with purpose, fulfillment, and magic. I'm Bernadette Logue. You can call me B, and I'm excited to share this episode with you.
Welcome to the podcast, everybody. I've got a special guest here with me, and she's been with us before. I'm so excited to invite you back. Welcome, Sherianna.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here. Great to be with you.
So we were just chatting about what you call yourself and your dynamic, magical, unicorn sparkliness, and we came to author of so many books and emotional detox coach and healer. So I'm going to share a little bit about you with everybody so they can tune into where you're coming from. And we're going to be talking today about a really important topic, but it's also the topic of a book that you have coming out. We're talking about freeing your emotions to energize your intuition and to discover purpose, which is like totally my jam. And I'm so excited to have this convo with you. So, welcome. Now, Sherianna is the author of 11 books. Oh my gosh, 11 books. The latest one coming out February 2025.
Yeah, the end of January. It's on pre-order now. It's called Just Ask Spirit. And then the subtitles, Free Your Emotions to Energize Intuition, Discover Purpose.
Oh, beautiful. So the book coming out in late January. You are also the best-selling author of the critically acclaimed Emotional Detox book series, founder of Emotional Detox Coaching, and the host of the Just Ask Spirit podcast, which I really encourage everyone to go and subscribe to. And also an adjunct psychology professor and adjunct professor of mindfulness and yoga. Fabulous. Featured in over 90 articles and a regular presenter at Kripalu Yoga and Health Center. So you have so much wisdom and so many years of this beautiful work under your belt. And I'm really delighted for you to be here to share with us like what this latest body of work is that you're doing around freeing your emotions, emotional freedom, and this connection in with intuition and purpose. So do you want to share a little bit about where this has been born from for you? Because you're well down the path of like birthing into the world these incredible books. Where did this topic come from?
It really came from, Emotional Detox, I created a series of books there, and I've been doing emotional detox work similar to you, Bernadette. You've been in this for about a decade, and I've been doing this for a couple of decades, but emotional detox was birthed probably the second half of everything. And that's when I really got into teaching people how to process what they feel. Now, here's what I've discovered as a coach and just with my own personal emotional detox experience, that for me, I don't know for you, I remember being connected to spirit when I was younger. I remember many of us when we're younger and we don't have all the responsibilities and the weight of the world and all the fears and worries. And upon us, we have a connection. And whether it's through nature or some people have their imaginary friends and things like that. So I remember very vividly having a connection to spirit. And as life goes on in my family, my birth family, there was just a lot of traumatic events that happened. One event, there's many, but one event was a terrible car accident. And so my brother was in a car accident and he ended up killing two of his best friends. As you can imagine, I was about 8 years old when this happened. And I really just discovered this through emotional detox and processing, Bernadette. But I remember as a 8-year-old thinking, I want to talk to the people that died. I want to tell them how sorry I am and feeling really horrible. But I remember simultaneously thinking, you don't deserve that. And this belief that shame and guilt and anxiety. And I remember feeling as a child conflicted. I want to connect, but something very bad happened. It's our fault. So that was the beginning of me being torn, and then also learning how to suppress my emotions, because back then we didn't really talk about it in our family, what happened. So many things happened, but I would found myself, as your listeners might identify, looking to reconnect with spirit, but also there's so much conditionings around that, because religion can kind of influence us, some of the conditioning and core beliefs. So it really wasn't until later in life, when I went through my own emotional detox and I really learned how to process my emotions, I was able to reconnect to that aspect of myself fully and completely, and really receive that healing. So, how Just As Spirit has come to be is, I believe that there's two avenues. Like, either we connect directly to spirit, or just drawn. And that's one avenue, which I frequently use now. I can just go direct, or we can process our emotions. And when direct, we can pray. There's many, or there's some of us who, if you feel similar to what I felt, blocked or shame or guilt, the other avenue for you is to give yourself permission to process your emotions and then connect that way. But it's not that one is better than the other. But I do have the motto now with Just As Spirit, and that's where I lay out the process of that, what that looks like. I do have a motto now that you feel first, then connect. Because I think sometimes our practices, we might connect out of fear, we might connect out of anxiety. It becomes another coping skill. Oh, please help me, God, get through this. And that's wonderful and valuable, but I don't know if it's helping us to process our emotions and to really deepen those experiences. So it's a long way to answer your question, but I think it's been the making for a long time for me, without me consciously realizing that I would eventually get to this point.
I just love that. It's born out of your truth, it's born out of your journey. It's like the best place for it to be born from. I really love that. And I very much resonate. I've got people in mind I'm thinking of as you're talking about this. In fact, a conversation I had with this beautiful woman a little while ago, and we were talking about visioning for your life, right? And so visioning, what is the possibilities ahead, and what is the soulful yearning, or what is the intuitive knowing, and what is the calling forth into the next season of your life. And we very quickly came to the conclusion that trauma was preventing any level of clarity. No clarity coming, no intuitive connection. And it's like trying to force out an intuitive connection, a spiritual connection, while you've got the heavy storm clouds of emotions that are blocking it, which essentially means we're dysregulated, right? And so we're dysregulated in our physiology. How are we ever meant to have this clear connection to that, because I find that if I'm really dysregulated, I will sit and I will walk through it, and it's just me talking and having all my feelings. There's nothing coming the other way, not because it's not coming, but because I can't sense it or feel it. And so I'm really relating to what you're saying. I think if you're at a different place in your life where you've processed, you probably have a bit more of a clear connection. Although I'm interested to know what you think about this, that even if we're carrying heavy emotions, we can get spiritual messages very clearly, very quickly, like almost they come out of nowhere. But so I think
Yes.
both are happening all the time, right?
I think so. And that's definitely happened to me. That happened when actually I was in a therapy session once with my husband. This is during my emotional detox period. And we were in therapy, and the therapist got distracted. She had to answer a phone call. So she left, and we were quiet, because it's, as therapy can be, sometimes it's intense, and you're just like, the tension's in the room. And so we were quiet, and she left to look at her phone or whatever. And in that moment, I heard a very strong voice. Now I know it was an archangel, because I work with spirit realms and I get to know, what do they sound like? What do they feel like? They're caught these loving beings. So I understand it now, but back then it was a voice. So I remember leaving that session, and this is what you're referring to. We're walking, there's like a driveway, we're walking to our cars, and it was so tense, everybody. We didn't even take the same car. Okay. Just to put the tension in perspective. And so we're walking out, and I turned to him and I said, "That's my last therapy session." And he was like, "What? Are you what?" He just came out of nowhere, "What you're saying." I said, "It's the last time." And normally you don't do that, right? You have closure, you let the therapist but it was like clear as a bell. And the fact that it even came out of my mouth was like very like I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't prepared, just popped out. So I think that's what you're referring to, just spirit. And I went home, and that was like my first ask, was just ask spirit. And I asked spirit, "What was that? Tell me more about what you have to say." Because when you ask spirit, you invite spirit. You're inviting spirit to share more, because they do love and respect us so much, our spiritual team and guides, that we do have to ask. So I said, "Tell me more." And that's when I started to get the system that I now teach for teaching people how to process their emotions. It started to download, but for whatever reason, I needed to not be influenced by a therapy session. And that was a wonderful, she was wonderful and helped us a ton. But I knew that if I continued, it was going to be hard for me to receive that clear guidance.
100%. And how interesting those moments, like as you're talking about that. First of all, it's multiple reflections. Yes, we must ask, right? The messages I get all the time are like, there's help, but you have free will. There's help, but we can't intercede unless there's invitation, because that's the deal with being down here in this gig called life, is we're doing free will. So I love that that is literally the title of the book, just ask. You have to invite.
Yes.
So
Yes.
good. I think like you, when you're talking about being in the middle of that scenario and it comes in so strongly and clearly, it's shockingly clearly not your own mind, not your own thought. I can think of 2 instances where I was in a really dark place, and I was actually feeling quite traumatized and very, very dysregulated. So physically, my body was there was all sorts of signs and symbols that things were not good for me. And so that's how I know I was not clear. I was not open. I was not in a balanced state. I was not in a good state for connecting to spirit yet. Between 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning of the witching hour of spirit reaching out, which is the time for some reason in the middle of the night, I had 2 instances where a word woke me, and it wasn't even a word I understood. I had to look it up in the dictionary. And I was like, clearly that's not me, because I don't even know what that means. And the message was very clear, very clear. And so I always took from that to take heart that if we're in a difficult place, we can get guidance, because I think some people are like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so dysregulated, I'm never going to get any help," or "I'm so caught in my emotions, I'm never going to get my intuition." But I think we can get it when we really need it. But what I'm hearing from you is that if we free ourselves of all of these emotions, these things we've been carrying since we're really young and have built up and compounded over time into a conditioned state, something happens. So talk to me about the emotional detox that you share about, like you're going to be sharing about in your book, and how that creates this magic for this deeper connection.
Yeah. So I completely understand with having to look up a word. Sometimes, quite frankly, it is a word that people use, but I don't actually understand the meaning of it. It's not like I haven't heard it before. And I'll say to my clients, I don't even know what this means. I need to look it up, right? But this is the word I'm hearing. So that is another sign that you're connected to spirit. So the system that I created for emotional detox is in the acronym of CLEANSE. And that stands for 7 mindful steps. Clear reactivity is the C, look inward. E is emit, which is mantra, which is vibration. A is called activate. And there's multiple meanings there, and it depends on which version of the cleanse you're using. So now I have versions. This is how this has evolved. And then, so where CLEAN is nourish, S is surrender, and E is ease. And so the previous steps support the next step. It's not just about the steps, it's about the order of the steps. I love the 7 steps. I know everybody likes 3 steps, 4 steps, 5 steps. I like 7 steps because we really want to start to change the brain. And it's so easy to go back to trauma. Anytime you go back to thinking, you're revisiting the trauma. The mind will always go back to trauma because the mind goes back to the past or fear of the future. So it just holds you just those few beats longer so you can really start to change the brain. So I have the cleanse version and emotional detox book series. That's that experience with the cleanse. I actually wrote a book in between Just As Spirit. I wrote Energy in Action. I don't think I've talked to you about that book. That one was all about, that was another hit from Spirit. So I'm in the middle of a cleanse and I hear, okay, now it's time to incorporate the rays of light, which you and I both.
Talk about that. The last time we met, I remember the rays of light because I remember it was very new to me and I learned a lot from, and you were on my podcast. We talked about this because I remember it
We
very
did?
distinctly
Okay.
because I read about it. I read that and I looked it up and I learned all about it when you came on and talked about it. Yes. So I do remember this. Yeah.
So that was another spirit moment. So I'm in the cleanse because I cleanse every day and I'm in my little cleanse spot. I just sit in a chair and I go through the cleanse steps. All of a sudden I hear that voice again, which I know comes from the angelic realms.
Mhm.
And they say, okay, now it's time to put in the rays of light. I'm like, what? I thought I was. So what they told me was, I've always wanted to teach about the spiritual laws, Bernadette, but I always felt like it was so many people have taught about it. Look at the secret, right? That's the biggest, the law of attraction. So many huge authors have taught about these laws. I thought, no, it's already been done. It's already been done. They were like, no, you're going to teach about them differently. So what they taught me was use the cleanse to process your emotions. And then what they wanted is to teach people how the spiritual laws help us to process our emotions. They're designed to be like a roadmap, a guidance system for emotional processing. And then within those laws, we incorporate the light. Now, the rays of light, not color. So there's a difference. Color has measurement. Rays of light are infinite and they come direct from source. So they're pure. And they are overseen by archangels, ascended masters. And so we use them in energy healing and we connect to them. And so what I did with energy in action is I paired the laws with the rays of light. So now I'm getting a new version of the cleanse. Okay, here's how to cleanse to harmonize with the spiritual law of oneness or the spiritual law of attraction. They started giving me more information on the laws. So as I'm doing that, then I get the next download once that book is done. And now it is, okay, now you're ready to start really talking about how to connect to, now you understand what Just As Spirit's all about. Mm-hmm. So really blending the light and our emotions, how they help us connect to spirit, and really learning how to process our emotions with the light. So that's the next version of that. And it's not that, okay, that the other versions are no longer good. It depends where you're at in your journey. So yeah, some exactly. People really need that foundational emotional detox version, which is where I was at with my marriage. And then as I became more proficient, and it's not that you can't start with Just As Spirit, because you could, it's whatever you're drawn to. But that's the one that I work with most frequently. I also think our consciousness has changed, don't you think, Bernadette? We're
100%. 100%. And I always remember somebody, I want to say it was Joe Vitale. I watched that had been doing work in the service of others for many decades, saying something like they got so far down their track, they realized that their original work was so far from where their current work was, but getting told by spirit Don't touch it, because people need it, because that's where they're at. They're at where you were at. And that's why
Mhm.
you mustn't remove it or judge it or change it, because everything meets people where they're at. And I
True.
do
Yeah.
think that things have changed a lot. I feel like just in the last couple of years, like maybe the last 24 months, that things are changing a
They
lot. And
say
when I
those
hear,
eclipses, that big eclipse that happened
it's just
back in
so
what
much
was
that's been
it?
going.
Was it was it in
It's like
March or April or something?
discombobulating is what I want to say. It's my favorite new word. I'm discombobulated.
Did you have the glasses and all that during the eclipse? Did you go
No,
out?
no, I didn't do that. I didn't do that, but I
Yeah.
watch it all with fascination and apply it. But I'm like a baby when it comes to understanding like the eclipses and all that stuff. So I tune into other people that know a lot about that to understand how it's affecting. But OMG, the effect of the astrological movements, everything is like undeniable. Undeniable.
We were all, I have a family of five. I have three daughters, and all five of us, it was so crazy. All five of us happened to be home that day. Now I have adult children. I have my youngest is
Mhm.
16. My oldest, my other girls are 20, 22, and 24. They were all around that day on the eclipse. Thank God mom had her crap together that day, because I actually ordered the glasses at five
Awesome.
glasses, and we all went outside and meditated
Oh, how
in five different.
beautiful. All of
Oh,
you. Oh my gosh.
we were outside. Must have been later in the year, because I remember we all had blankets on, like we were wrapped in blankets, but we went separate. It was like, you go to your spot, I'll go to my spot. All five of us meditated
Oh my God, that makes my heart so happy. Oh my God. The whole family meditating together. It's so
outside.
good.
It
It's
was
so
the
good.
coolest thing ever. But I do think that shifted timelines for sure for people. And
Yeah.
I know that's like a crazy word to think about with timelines, but I saw your
Mhm.
timeline. I know you're going to be on my show, Just Us Spirit, but I love your
Mhm.
timeline on your website. You
Yeah,
know,
I
when
feel
you
like some
had
very
your,
strange things are happening. The whole thing about time is, let's not go down this rabbit hole too far. Time is not real. There are no past lives. It's all just
mm,
simultaneous lives. It's all just parallel happening. It's just blowing my mind constantly. And the beautiful
yeah,
things about how we can therefore step into our healing like in a much more rapid way than our minds can wrap our minds around. So we don't understand how
everything's
rapidly things can
accelerated.
shift. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
accelerated. Yeah.
And, when I hear you talking about like this evolution of emotional detoxing and the way that it's unfolding and the way that you're working with people, other than, first of all, it's so absolutely freaking fundamentally, foundationally essential and vital, because the emotional baggage and trauma and energy that's being carried and the dysregulation as a result of that, I think, is so deeply underrated as the core issue, because everyone's about the mind and psychology, and I get it. I totally get it. But there's a reason why people are sitting in psychological processes for so long and not getting results, because emotions are running in a way that they're not being honored, not being processed, not being released. So it's so important. But the other thing is that I just love how Spirit is constantly downloading in. Okay, there's like a whole bunch of the human collective. This is what they need. They're not getting it. This is what we need. So we're downloading through different people that are doing the work. What is it that is necessary to now create the evolution? Now, if you'd been doing this work, if this work had downloaded like 30 years ago, would it just have not met the consciousness of where people are at? So it's like this timing thing. Why is it that these new things
It's
are coming
true.
through, like plant medicine and this rise of plant medicine at this particular point in time? There's just lots of different things that have probably, obviously, it's all one mind, it's all one divine mind, it's all one consciousness, and it's all one source of this wisdom. But it's coming through, seeping through into the 3D reality at greater rates for a reason, and coming into
Yes.
different people all over the planet for a reason. Um, Tell me about what you understand about this emotional detoxing as it relates to intuition and purpose, which is obviously a core
Yeah.
part of this book that's coming out.
I want to be clear before I get into that, is that when I talk about detoxing, I'm talking about detoxing reactions. So emotions, that's the clarity I got from going through the emotion basics of an emotional detox. We're not getting rid of your emotions. We're getting to them.
Mm.
And sometimes what we're calling an emotion is actually a reaction. Anger is a reaction. Guilt is a reaction. And I know that's hard to wrap your brain around because we're so used to the labeling. What I have learned in this, how it transitions to just as spirit, is reactions will always separate us. Pure emotions, so that's in the absence of reactivity, will always bring us closer together. My concern with the psychological community, and I teach psychology. That's part-time. I've been teaching psychology for 15 years. So I have the latest textbook every semester on what are we teaching? And the thing is, we still are teaching emotions a little bit as a reaction to the outside world or the inner world. We don't really go much beyond that in the psychology realm. So I have anger because of something happening outside of me, right? Or I have anger because I'm having inner turmoil or something happening inside of me. So we don't really get beyond that reaction part, which means we don't really teach the next level, which is, okay, what happens when I process my emotions? Then what is my experience with my emotions? And so what I have learned through spiritual practice such as meditation, what's in the cleanse, because in the cleanse, you're going to experience breathing. So what you're going to experience mantra, which teaches breath too. So that clear reactivity is all about that. How do you regulate the body? What you're talking about. And it's not through talking. We don't regulate ourselves through talking. How many of us have talked about something so much that we're exhausted?
Round and round
Right?
and round and round. And people get re-traumatized. There's re-traumatization. It's like
Exactly.
it is in many circumstances very helpful and cathartic. But what I see is if there is significant emotion that has not been processed, then talking about it is like not helping if there's not some other aspect of moving that energy, of processing that energy. And that I listening to you talk about, it's very beautiful because without you having said the words, what I feel from you and what resonates for me, and I think probably for the people listening, is that no emotion is bad emotion. Emotions are not something we have to run away from, get rid of, never have. Anger is sacred. Every feeling has a message. It's to be welcomed. It's not that. It's how we hold on to it, run away from them, hide them, shove them down, eat them, all the things that we do to try to cope with this massive, we're in these little bodies with this massive energy coursing through us. What do I do with it?
That's why our guides are constantly trying to send us spiritual messages. They're trying to calm us down because when we're calm, we process. They know that. So these little hints of reassurance that you get when people see numbers or they get a bird visitor or something. And the other day I was telling my husband this. I was reading a book on my back deck and I hear this bzzz, and I thought it was a bee. And first thought was, I'm going to get stung. It's right in front of my face. And I look up and it's a hummingbird, literally 6 inches from my face, just hovering in front of me. And I knew because something had just occurred in my life, I had a shift and I knew that was my message. And it was my message, everything's going to be okay. Yeah. And you're on your path. That's what we all want to know, Bernadette. Am I on my path? Am I doing all right here? Did I veer off, spirit? Or
did I take a wrong turn somewhere? And how many times, even though, just for anyone listening, I do that all the time. Like how many times I've done that. Spirit must just be doing the forehead slap emoji all the time. Like how many, like my sister and I laugh. It's like, how many signs do we have to give before you stop asking for the signs? Right, but they're so good.
And they'll keep giving the signs even when you don't ask. But when you ask for a sign, and then to make sure you say thank you. But I got that message loud and clear when I got that hummingbird in my face. But I forgot, I got distracted with that story. But I think that
fabulous story. I'm so glad you told it because it's just like you were saying, like we're getting these things to calm us down. They know that we need to be calm.
Right.
And
yeah, they help us. Yeah. Yeah. We're not supposed to be My concern again, and I see this a lot with clients, is when in the psychological community, sometimes there can be a real judgment factor. Somebody's really bad for you and toxic, get rid of them, get them out of your life. That happens. And I understand if somebody's in an abusive situation and they need to keep themselves safe, and spirit will assist with that as well. But my concern is as you mentioned, the traumatization and then the separation. Because what I've learned from spirit is that really when our emotions are in a processing state, we feel closer to. We come now, here we go back with those laws. We come in alignment with the spiritual laws, which is one is the spiritual law of oneness. We are one. What happens to you happens to me. If I say that you're an SOB and you're a piece of crap and wish you ill will, well, guess what?
Like A Course in
That's a
Miracles, as
ripple
I
effect.
crucify another, I crucify myself. It's like what you do to another, you do to yourself. It's in all the different, the texts, the scriptures, it's the thing. And it does not, I love that, what you're talking about. And so this calm, coming to emotional processing in order to come to calm, there are so many layers of what is rippling out from that. Obviously, we all want relief from difficult emotions, but what we're getting is calm. What we get in calm is alignment. Spiritual laws, what we get is clearer, I feel clearer connection, spirit. Like as soon as I can process my emotions the way that I do it, breath work, EFT, other things, is that I will immediately feel a sense of presence and my trust level goes way up. My trust in life goes up. Everything feels open. Like I feel open to life versus this contraction, separate, alone, which invokes fear. And fear is never going good places.
Yeah. And there's many there's movies out there. I don't know. Have you seen the movie? I Can Only Imagine. It was recommended to me. Have you seen that? That was another one that was delivered, but it's a movie about someone who went through severe abuse, and then in the end was able to forgive their father and move closer to God and closer to source. And I think it's just, these are moments where and he says, I just never imagined that and the reason he was able to move closer is he saw in the end, his dad was able to transform his life from being an abusive person to someone who was kinder and trying to practice and forgiveness. And so it's just that's a movie you could watch if you're having a hard time trying to figure out how am I going to go from this space of animosity. And I had to go through that with my marriage. So I get what it's like to be in a situation. I also had an upbringing where there was a lot of abuse around me. And I think a lot of us grew up in circumstances where we observed things that were very unhealthy or dysfunctional, and then have new relationships with these same people. So that's why I'm cautious when we're saying when there's a lot of judgment involved. And I think we have to be careful about that in the psychological community. I do think part of my podcast and I'm sure with you too, Just as Spirit, is about bridging the gap between spirituality and mental health. I think emotions and spirit have so much in common. Really, honestly, they're once you start to process your emotions, what I say in Just as Spirit, it all becomes one. It will be hard to separate the two. If you desire to separate the two, you will have to regress back into old behaviors to do that.
That's so interesting, because the way that I talk about it and have for a very long time is that the way your soul speaks to you is through the language of feeling.
That's it, sister.
Those are not feelings that you're having in reaction to something else. It's not a feeling you're choosing for yourself. It is a message that's moving through you, and it's a compass. It's a navigational system for what to move away from and what to move into, what to pay attention to, what is not working for you, what is working for you. And it's like you have a values and a soulful alignment inside. And when that gets pushed or overstepped or ignored or suppressed or lit up, you will know, because you will have feelings about that.
Absolutely. You can't do it without feeling, and you can't discover purpose without feeling.
No.
Purpose is a knowing.
Yes.
I
Yes.
know I'm in my
Amen.
purpose, right? I
Amen to that.
know yes, it's an inner knowing. You just know it. Nobody tells you you're in your purpose. You know it, and it can only come from inside.
Mhm. And you cannot get that from going and doing some practical exercise, and I'm going to do this like career thing where I'm going to figure out what my purpose is, thinking that, well, first of all, purpose is not your career. Purpose can be your career, but it's not totally your career because children have purpose, old people, retired people have purpose. It's not our career. It's
Yes.
so much different and more than that. But I think one of the things that blocks people, like this lovely person I had spoken to when we were talking about visioning and having a visioning of a future possibility for our life and what shall I do next and what feels right and what feels purposeful, is that is getting blocked by a lot of heavy emotions because
Mm.
that's loud, and it's like you're in a room and sitting in the back seats are your intuitive knowingness and your passions and your inspirations and all the things your soul is whispering to you. And then at the front is like a whole lot of heavy emotions, banging drums and walking through loudspeakers. And nobody can hear what's going on in the back row
That's
because
right.
these things, but why are they loud and why are they at the front? The reason
Yeah,
is not because they're greedy for attention, it's because they need to be heard because they have to go first.
that's right.
Right. So whatever
That's right.
is nudging. So there's no stuffing that stuff down and then trying to forge forward and find my path because the
You
path
can't,
is
and I've
through.
done it. I'm sure you've done it, and I did it as well, and it really was detrimental to me. I thought I put other things first. It's easy to stay busy and to say, "I don't have time. I don't have time
Yeah.
to feel, or I don't have time." We think that, and a lot of that is based on belief systems about our emotions,
Yeah.
just like we have belief systems about spirit, right? Just like I
Yes.
had. And it was both. When I said to myself, "Well, you don't deserve to connect," it was the same thing. You don't deserve to feel.
Mm.
You don't deserve to heal. So these are all
Mm.
instilled in me unknowingly at 8 years old. And then we don't talk about it. We
Mm.
silence ourselves. Yeah, I think our purpose is to love, quite frankly,
Mm. Mm.
to
And isn't that
love.
such a beautiful level of relief in the way we love? Then looks
Mm,
like a dynamic dance with life because the way we love others, the way we love the world, the way we express that is dynamic and beautiful. And I
and
think
it's not
I feel
always
compelled.
flowery. It's not always
No,
flowery love. Sometimes love is not enabling.
yes, 100%, right? 100%, 100%. Like there's so many misunderstandings about this, right? This is a question I get a lot as well. How do I be love when this person is being abusive? And I'm like, love in that situation is a hard boundary.
Yes,
Love in that situation is I'm not having a conversation with you while you were yelling at me. Love in that situation is I'm not about this. And I'm not
exactly.
going, and I love you enough and I love myself enough. I'm not going to enable this pattern to continue. And I think there's a very confused thing about, oh, we'll just be love and oneness, and thinking that somehow is like bypassing people's bad behavior and just letting it go and letting people do whatever. It's not that at all. It's not that at all. I do think there's just one thing that came up a couple of times when you were talking, because there are loads of people that have had like big T trauma, but there's also a lot of people that go, I didn't go through. I didn't go through any of those things. And what's wrong with me that I could? And I think this little T trauma, which is just this thing that all of us do as human beings, there's no getting around it. You're going to go through things in life that are difficult. And what is traumatizing for a 3-year-old is not necessarily what we consider traumatizing as adults in the clinical textbook definition of it, right? These little things, micro things that build up. And looking back, I can see I had a very loving home and loving upbringing, but there were really difficult things that happened, right? So there's grief, there's death, there's things going on, and there's not a lot of processing and understanding of that. And so what happens is it's not really about the degree and level to which we go through things, although it is more significant for people that have big T trauma. But there is nevertheless an accumulation of emotional baggage for anybody who is human until you grow up and realize it's happening and you do something about it. And I think there's a whole kind of group of people who go, I don't have any justification for my issues because I didn't go through anything, so I should just suck it up and get on with that. And there's nothing to point to. They can't point to a thing that says that this is the thing. And I thought for many years, and I always had this to tell this joke, is that I said to my sister, I don't have any childhood stuff processed. And to me, that's what the ones say that have all the stuff to process. And I remember thinking, oh, and it's not actually until in my 40s that I've been like, oh yeah, okay. Now I get it. Now I can see massive patterns because I was just driving forward, drive to survive, move forward, no time sitting around doing any other things. And at the same time was thinking, I'm so spiritually connected. And of course, I was
Yes.
getting so many messages from spirit and I was getting so many signs and synchronicities and there was flow. But lo and behold, I did not realize there was a whole lightning leap, quantum leap to a new soulful version of myself if I would just clear this emotional baggage. And I think that's just worth the inquiry. What am I carrying that maybe I can put down now?
Yeah, and I love the definition of trauma from the author, The Body Keeps Score, when he says trauma is anytime you're scared stiff. And I think all you have to do is watch the news, or now with social media, we're all being bombarded with, if it's not happening direct, it's happening around us. And again, we're one according to the spiritual laws. So you don't really need something really specific, although that can come up as you process your emotions. Again, that's how that stuff does get uncovered. You might not know directly. You might think, it wasn't that bad, really didn't have an effect on me until you start processing. And then you realize, this is coming up and this is coming up to be released, to be seen, because that's how we get the learnings and the lessons and the growth, to see, wow, that did have an effect on me more than I'm realizing.
More than I realized. And it's having more of an effect in my life now than I realized. The leaking through into the current life is a big thing that I've seen. Yeah.
And then it gets passed on in families. Things we genetically get. Gosh, I heard my daughter say something the other day and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I felt like it was my husband. I was like, what? Holy crap, it's already happening. Things are getting passed on. And it was like something around the word should or something, which we're all working on around here. We're all very aware the shoulds, which is a word, another way that we suppress. If you're a shoulder, you're suppressing something and you're probably managing emotions through trying to be perfect. There's
expectations, obligations.
High expectations.
I've never heard anyone talk about it like that. Ooh, okay, that's a gem right there. When you should, there's a suppression. Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yes.
Question, if someone is listening and they're like, oh yeah, I need to do some of this emotional processing, this emotional detoxing. The new book is coming out late January. You've got the books, so they'll be able to find those at your website, sheriannaboyle.com. I'm going to put a link below this video so people can find it. Do those books help them to process for themselves? Can they be at home, read the books, and be able to do some processing?
They're designed that way. Yeah. So Just a Spirit is the only one I've designed where I always write out the cleanses for you. So all the books, like Energy in Action with the Laws, has 52 emotional cleanses. Just as Spirit, I write out the cleanses for people. And then what's different in that book than any of the others is there's space for journal prompts, because then once you process, you ask your question, and I give 57 questions to ask Spirit in that book. And then there's space for you to write your answer. And then there's space. It's a process. So you can in real time receive, but that's not the only way to get your answer through writing. So they can ask one question and they can learn how to get the answer in 5 different ways.
Oh, I love this. This sounds so fun. I want
I'm
a copy
so
of this
excited.
book. I need to get a copy of this book because I just think this is so fun.
Different. Yeah,
I
we
love
all
spiritual connection. I love developing always new ways to upskill, to be in
yeah.
clearer
Well, feel free to
communication with spirit
pre-order.
realm. I
And then,
love it. So how can we pre-order? You did tell
well,
me I'm going to send them to justaskspiritbook.com.
yes, because they get a free gift there. So just as spiritbook.com, you get a downloadable journal, which gives you 7 prompts in that journal. When it's an honor system, quite frankly, I'm not going to try to like fool anybody. You can order the book and I just ask people, order the book, then download your gift. But again, and then it's got a
Perfect.
meditation there too. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
fun. Okay, amazing. So justaskspiritbook.com. This has been so enlightening. What would you want to leave people with? Because that book's by the time this airs, they'll have to wait a little bit for it to come out. They can jump on the pre-order. What would you like to leave them with to ponder, to reflect on, final parting words of wisdom from all of these many years that
Well,
you've been doing this?
I'll just leave with what I always say. It's been my motto for years, and that is your emotions matter. Processing them matters more.
Hmm. So true. Hands down. I feel like I just need
Yes,
to do a drum roll and then a cymbal and something else, because it's
that's it.
so true. And it's so timely that we're back in touch and you reached out about this, because this topic is like, I'm hot on it at the moment. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. And I'm going to make sure there's links with this video so people can go pre-order the book, visit your website, check out the other books while they're waiting for it to come out.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Practical Spirituality with B. I'll talk to you next episode for more spiritual advice for your everyday life, helping you align with your soul so you can live with purpose, fulfillment, and magic.